The music is like a kind of call to prayer for this show, isn't it? Welcome to Uncovered. I'm Anthony Davis. He is Ron Filipkowski, and he's the editor-in-chief of MeidasTouch.com. And every Wednesday, he and I come together to react to the news that is just breaking, but also look at some of the MAGA propaganda that is not really covered by the mainstream media, and we uncover it here on Uncovered. Ron, it's all happening. It's all kicking off. Today is a very big day for the news, starting, of course, with the MAGA Republican Mike Johnson, who has been voted House Speaker, 220 to 209 votes. Every House Republican voted for this far-right Christian nationalist white supremacist. He really is the last person you want in this role. And just quickly to quote Mary Trump, Donald Trump's niece, she said, "The fascists have taken over the House of Representatives."
Yeah, I think that that's true. I mean, we had the drama yesterday with the establishment candidate, Tom Emmer, which we can talk about in a second, which was just bizarre behavior by Trump yet again. But what we ended up with was this guy that many of his colleagues were Googling last night because they didn't know who he was. Many members of the Senate were Googling him as well because they didn't know who he was. He's sort of a backbencher, not well-known guy. But it's basically like taking a 45-year-old Pat Robertson and making him Speaker of the House. You know, that's pretty much where we're at. He's against gay marriage. He wants a complete ban on abortion. He wants to cut Social Security and Medicare. He wants to repeal Obamacare. We can go on and on and on. He ideologically, from a policy standpoint, yeah, I mean, he's basically like a more religious version of Ron DeSantis.
And he got up into the speaker chair and made a speech, a brief speech, and everything he said was about divine intervention, about how this was God's decision and that God put him here and God put us all here and God has chosen us to do this. And I was thinking to myself, what happened to the separation of church and state? You know, he will put, Christian nationalism at the center of a lot of this. We're not talking about moderate Christianity here, are we?
No. And just to be clear, I mean, people like him and the far right, they do not believe in the separation of church and state. And part of the reason why they don't believe in it is because of some of the vagueness in the Constitution, where it says that the government can't establish a religion. And the way that that has been interpreted by the Supreme Court 100 years ago is to read that statement to mean that there is a separation of church and state. But those words are not actually in the Constitution. And that's what people like him argue, is that there really never should have been a separation of church and state, that the founders never wanted that they never intended for that to be the case. I think they did, but they don't believe that. And so really what they're trying to do is repeal that old case law from 100 years ago and do away with the separation of church and state. So, yeah, he's definitely in that camp.
And they have the same view about democracy. They say we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic.
Correct.
And I've heard him use that language as well.
Yep.
So, and he voted, just to be clear, he voted against the certification of the 2020 election, right, which makes him an insurrectionist. But he's also the guy that I saw in one of these committee hearings where he was grilling a medical doctor about abortion. And he kept saying, would you kill the baby as it was passing through the birthing canal? I mean, the most horrific, vile, inappropriate language that he was just trying to trick her to say that, to make it look like that she would be willing to do that. And of course, the woman on the stand did not. I forget her name and I apologize, but I have actually tweeted that clip. So, we're dealing with somebody who is not normal. He is extreme at the very least.
Yeah, and also his remarks on Social Security were pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah, that was nuts.
Yeah, where, instead of arguing, raising the age or raising the price or taxing it or whatever different reforms are out there, what he said is, look, the solution to Social Security is to have more babies. And if we ban abortion, that's going to produce more babies and that will help save Social Security.
Yeah, more people paying into the system.
Yeah, force women to give birth to help us in our retirement.
And it's not just a puerile and pathetic argument, lacking all intellect. But it is also the language of the Christian nationalists who have a very kind of unorthodox way of thinking, and they have convinced themselves, and we'll talk about Jenna Ellis in just a little while, but she argues that she also was, in this world. God told her to do this, and you end up with, for those of us, I'm an atheist, as you know, and so to me, like, none of this has any value, and yet for them, it's their entire argument that God told them to do this stuff.
Yeah, and when they start mixing it with policy,
Yeah,
that's when it becomes I mean, we're seeing that even in Israel. I mean, a huge part of the reason why so many of these evangelicals are very pro-Israel is not anything to do with collective security or national interest. It goes back to the Bible. It's because that's where Jesus is from.
right.
And that's the homeland. And the Jews are God's chosen people, so we should help them.
Yeah.
And that's their argument versus helping Israel versus helping Ukraine.
Yeah.
Is that, Ukraine's not in the Bible.
Well, and also they all want to end up in Israel because, of course, that being the Holy Land, and that's where they're going to get their absolution. That is the place that ultimately in the spirit world, I don't know what you would even call it, this is where these people want to end up.
And that's why for secular people, our dream destination might be Rome or something, but theirs is Jerusalem. I mean, so many evangelicals spend their vacations in Israel.
Yeah. Mine is Hollywood. Let's just talk a little bit more about Mike Johnson before we move on and talk about the cases that are happening at the moment. He is from Louisiana, right? And so you could argue that a lot of his politics is maybe inspired by the cult. I don't know, the culture. You explained to me how Louisiana will kind of impress upon him to bring certain types of bills to the House.
I mean, it's definitely, we just had a Democratic governor of Louisiana, but a relatively centrist one. But sure, I mean, he's a Southern evangelical. I think he's Baptist. And Louisiana has a history in this country of disproportionate power to their population because they have a history of having their congressmen and senators serve long periods of time. And so they've always had their representatives in senior positions on committees or speakers, so Louisiana has always been in an odd position where they've always had far more influence in the federal government than their population really warrants.
And then finally, we should just say that what are the chances of avoiding a government shutdown with this guy in charge? Because I get the feeling, because he's Trump endorsed, he's a MAGA Republican. I get the feeling he's going to be pushing for a government shutdown.
Well, what he said he wants to do is basically the same thing McCarthy was trying to do, which is what he said is he wants another continuing resolution to give him time, because what he wants to do is what the Freedom Caucus wants is they want 9 separate appropriations bills to be passed. Separate votes. In other words, not rolled up in one big omnibus bill like Pelosi always did. Separated out, defense, domestic spending, etc., aid to Ukraine, and separate packages, and vote up or down on each one. And what he wants is another continuing resolution to extend the deadline out to January to give him time to do all of that. Well, That's what McCarthy was arguing that he was doing. So it's basically the same thing. It's definitely a different approach. Whether they would be able, the problem is getting those 9 things passed through the Senate, because in many cases, they're going to cut a lot of funding for things that the Senate will not agree with. The most interesting thing to watch is Ukraine, because he is against Ukraine funding. The Senate and the White House both wants to put Ukraine funding in a package with Israel funding and funding for the southern border.
Yeah.
House Republicans want to decouple that. If they do decouple it, the Senate will likely reject that, and that could get bogged down. And as we know, there's an urgent need to get both things through quickly. So whether he's going to agree that that's urgent or not, we will see.
And the final thing, in addition to being anti-abortion, also introduced federal legislation modeled on Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, and has been opposed to gender-affirming care. And obviously,
Absolutely.
to be so outwardly anti-LGBTQ plus at this time when it's obviously so difficult for the trans community and the gay community generally to hear this rhetoric, more of the same now. No chance of it quietening down.
Because he believes that being gay is against God's design and
Yeah.
against God's will. So it's immoral. And he's always been against gay marriage and is against gay marriage to this day. So yeah, if Obergefell gets overturned, which is certainly possible, he voted against the federal statute to codify gay marriage. He voted against that. So yeah, not only on economic issues, but on social issues, he is very far right.
Let's talk about Donald Trump, because as we speak, he has been in court once again. I mean, he's going to be in court pretty much every day or every other day for the next foreseeable, right? I mean, with so many cases against him. Here with Judge Engoron again, this is the violation of the gag order, something that Midas Touch actually exposed initially. Tell us about how that happened and what happened with the initial fine and then today with this new fine.
So on the last one, yeah, it was Ben or Brett. I'm not sure which one of the brothers first got a tip, or somebody had tipped them off that, Trump had made the social media post doxing the judge's clerk, and that's what got him in trouble. The judge ordered him to take down any reference to his clerk. Trump took that down off Truth Social. However, we got the tip that it was still up on his campaign website. And he actually had sent it out in an email, and a fundraising email as well.
Right.
So we became aware of that, and we posted that, and we said, look, Trump is still violating this gag order. So I think what happened is one of the reporters or one of the lawyers in the courtroom saw our story, alerted the judge to it, and yes, brought him in. And of course, Trump claimed, look, I'm not in charge of the website. That's my employees. One of my employees screwed up. They didn't take it down. With Trump, there's always buffers.
Always someone else to blame.
Always an explanation, right? So, the judge, I guess in that instance, I can understand a little bit him giving him the slap on the wrist and stern warning, which he did. $5,000 fine. Don't do it again, or I might put you in jail. So I didn't have the hugest problem with that one because there was some plausible deniability there. But this new one today, I'm pretty upset at the judge for not doing more than a $10,000 fine today.
And I would just caveat this with that we were told that Donald Trump will be treated like any other defendant.
Yeah.
And this is absolutely not happening, is it? He is getting special treatment. He's getting ex-president treatment because of the ramifications of, public outcry or unrest or something. I mean, what is the reason why a $5,000 fine followed by today's $10,000 fine? What is the reason for this? Because, this is like Trump getting free publicity for his campaign.
Yeah, I think that this judge is so, and others is so afraid of putting this man in jail. Even if you just put him in jail for a week or 10 days, I think Trump would learn a very hard lesson just spending a night in jail.
Yeah.
But that's the only thing that's going to get through to this guy. But of course, then you have all the Secret Service issues and all of that involved. So I think the judge is probably processing all of that, what that would entail. But it's the only thing that's going to stop this guy. He's not going to stop with fines. He takes the fines, he uses them to fundraise, and he makes 100 times more than the fine. So what he did today was he was mad because he was unhappy with what Michael Cohen was testifying to today. He goes out during the morning break and he says, rips the judge again. And the judge has already told him not to give these little press conferences in the courthouse. He just ignores that and thumbs his nose at the judge on that. But then he criticizes the judge, but the gag order is only the judge's staff. So what he says next is, and the person sitting next to the judge is even worse, even more biased. Well, that's his clerk who's sitting next to him.
Yeah.
So he gets hauled. He comes back from the break, gets hauled in front of the judge, and the judge says, you just did it again. And then Trump's lawyers said, oh, no, he was talking about Michael Cohen. He wasn't talking about so it's always like some explanation. Oh, no, he didn't mean the clerk. So So the judge said, I'm going to think about what I'm going to do, comes back after the lunch break, orders Trump to get on the stand, puts him under oath, and says, who were you talking about when you said person sitting next to me? And he said, oh, I was talking about Michael Cohen, Judge. And the judge says, I don't believe you. You're not, I don't find you to be credible. I think you're lying. I'm fining you $10,000. And, up to that point, everything was great, but then, we find him $10,000. Just what a joke. I mean, Trump just has to laugh about something like that.
Here's a little clip of Trump criticizing Cohen in the courthouse.
So he's a liar, trying to get a better deal for himself, but it's not going to work. This case, by any other judge, this case would have been over a long time ago. We did nothing wrong, and that's been proven. Thank you. We'll be out there.
I also noticed that Trump was asked, how's it going? And he said, oh, it's going really well. We did great in there. Rewriting the narrative. And there has been, this is kind of interesting, isn't it, that some commentators have said that his lawyer, Alina Habba, is actually doing kind of well. She's with the Cohen case, the way that she's presenting the arguments.
Well, she's doing well because she's cross-examining Michael Cohen.
Right.
And Michael Cohen is fertile ground to plow for any cross-examiner because look, Cohen,
because he's a former Trump employee, right?
Well, not only that, I mean, Cohen has freely admitted on the stand that he lied so many times. He lied to the Senate. He lied to the House. He lied in court. He lied to the press. I mean, he went years and years in Trump's employ and a little bit thereafter. Until he agreed to cooperate with the government and made his deal, he lied right up until that point. So, when as a cross-examiner, anybody out of law school could take all those lies and have a field day. And that's what she did, just walking through all the times when he lied, and he freely admitted that he lied. So, yeah, that's going to make any lawyer look good when you have a witness like Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen's a bit all over the place. And the other problem is that Michael Cohen, basically his business now is Donald Trump. His business is criticizing Donald Trump through his podcast, through his book sales. And she brought out that he also has a financial incentive to continue to trash Trump. So yes, she was made to look good because she had a witness that was very vulnerable.
And we should also say at this point that Michael Cohen is a contributor to the Midas Touch Network.
Yes.
And there's plenty of podcast action to catch with him down below. Let's talk about what happened on the 9th of October. Special Counsel Jack Smith, he dropped a cryptic and intriguing nugget in a court filing in the classified documents case against Trump. New revelations coming out that actually Trump might have been sharing classified information with this Australian businessman. And Anthony Pratt, his name is. Pratt by name, Pratt by nature. Funny-looking chap. When you see them side by side. Was it somebody wrote that it looks like Donald Trump's face is Anthony Pratt's hair and vice versa? I think that's what it was. But anyway, not to be disrespectful of someone's appearance, Anthony Pratt has now, all these tapes have been released to Jack Smith of Anthony Pratt basically saying what a Pratt Donald Trump is. Just explain for us.
So 2 weeks ago in Jack Smith's response to Trump's attempt to delay the trial in the documents case, he mentioned some of the reasons why it shouldn't be delayed and why they were bending over backwards to get Trump discovery and all of that. There was one line in there, and that's the line that caught my attention and a couple other legal analysts, which was, he said, we are also prepared to prove, even though we don't have to, we are also prepared to prove the reason why Trump took these documents and what he intended to do with them. Now, this led me to believe, and others, that, okay, this means Trump did not just take these as trinkets to show off to his friends. He had specific illegal, bad reasons for taking these, for each one. And he picked out certain ones that he wanted, and he had specific reasons for wanting each one. So that takes the documents case to a whole nother level. Now we're not just talking about him stealing shit because he wanted to show off. Now we're talking about him having an evil intent, maybe a treasonous intent. So, but we were all wondering, well, what is the proof? What is the evidence? 2 weeks later, we have Pratt come out and tell his story to Australia 60 Minutes and talk about the fact that and outline sort of how Trump used classified information to leverage and to make money off him, because this guy is giving Trump millions of dollars in VIP tickets, donations, staying at his hotel, his resorts, etc.
Becoming
and
a
Trump
member
is
of
sharing
Mar-a-Lago.
with him this stuff.
Right.
And so it shows how he creates this financial incentive to play president and to share secrets with powerful people, powerful businessmen who are seeking access and influence. So when you take that combined also with Mark Meadows, which we'll talk about in a minute, because Mark Meadows would have been the one who would have directed which documents to round up and take. Why? You start to see the case coming together.
And this is what you and I were discussing last week, the idea that there is, that Jack Smith has got stuff up his sleeve.
Yes.
And this really is the first nugget of that there is corroborating evidence to say that it was very specific documents that were taken. There was leverage involved, because we all had a hunch, like who's he going to blackmail or who's he going to sell documents to? Well, now we're starting to find out.
We're starting to find out. And I think there was a different motive for each document. I think he had a very specific purpose. I want this to blackmail Mark Milley. I want this to use against Mike Pence. Right. I want this to give to someone. I want this to show to someone. He had different reasons for each thing. The person who knows those reasons, one of them is Mark Meadows. And so it had to be even more devastating to him to learn yesterday that Mark Meadows has 3 times testified in front of a grand jury.
Right. Every instinct in my body and mind, and I'm sure plenty of people watching too, of Trump being like a terrible person or being a traitor or having evil intentions, all of my instinct always turns out to be true. Or the more time we spend in this guy's orbit, the more evidence that comes out, it just corroborates our own instinct for what awful president he was, and how dangerous his presidency will continue to be.
And along those lines, I think people fall into a trap when they say that Donald Trump is stupid and an idiot. In many ways, he is. He's uneducated. He's uncultured. He's uninterested in learning about the world or history or all of that. In that sense, he is stupid. But he's not stupid in the respect that he is very cunning and he's very sinister. And for his scams and his schemes, he's actually quite smart, and he understands how to cover up and how to protect himself and how to do things. So yes, finally there's somebody who's unraveling the schemes and boring in on them. But up to this point, look, Trump's gotten away with this stuff his whole life.
It's a little bit like petty criminals, burglars and people like that who were born into a life of crime, even on a small scale, and they just don't know how to go straight. So if they go to prison, they come out of prison, they just go back to crime. It's like the only way they know how to make a living. And that, to me, is how Trump is. He fancies himself as a mob boss. He considers the Trump organization, the Trump family, to be like a mafia family. And it's like this is his vocation. Breaking the law is his pleasure. And the denials, we've done nothing wrong. It's so offensive to anybody and everybody who abides by the rule of law, because he just doesn't care for it.
He doesn't think it should apply to him. The Constitution shouldn't apply to him because he knows more than everybody else. He's smarter than everybody else, and only he has the solutions to all the world's problems. So all of these rules and laws just get in the way of his ability to, be the benefactor of the world, be the autocrat.
Let's talk about Mark Meadows just in this moment, because I always said, and I said to you a while back, and I've been saying on the weekend show that, Mark Meadows really is the nucleus of a lot of this evidence, isn't he? His cell phone and his burner phone, and no matter, his emails. I mean, there's so much information was coming in and going out because he was the chief of staff. He held the position longer than any other chief of staff. We had a few, didn't we? We had John Kelly for a while. But the point is that Mark Meadows was totally up for the criminal scheme to overturn the election, to do Trump's bidding. He was on board 100%. And now we've discovered that, as you just said, he's spoken to a grand jury 3 times, but in return for immunity, he is flipping on his former boss, Donald Trump. What does this mean for the case as a whole? And do you think it's possible that Mark Meadows can tell the truth? I mean, is he going to be able to, put his hand on a Bible and see that through?
Well, I think so. I think so, because I think that Mark Meadows is... Look, I said this way back. I said 2 things way back in 2021, and I reposted these tweets several times, which is if you were at 30,000 feet as a Jack Smith and you were looking at the whole conspiracy of what happened on January 6th, and you needed to identify one person who was the hub of the wheel, where all roads lead to Rome, all roads lead to one person, Trump, members of Congress, Proud Boys, Oath Keep, all of these outside groups, Rudy, Michael Flynn, everyone involved in this, the fake elector scams, John Eastman, all the spokes lead to the one hub, and that's Mark Meadows. And Mark Meadows is the connection to Trump. And so what I said at the time was, if you could choose one person to flip, to go after and get on your side and give him the sweetheart deal of the century to get his ass out of trouble, I would choose Mark Meadows. Right. Not because he's a good guy, because he's a scumbag, but because he knows everything. He has the goods on everyone, including members of Congress. And so what I said at that time is, make a deal with Meadows. And number 2, he's a weak man. He's not somebody like a Scott Perry or a Jim Jordan who's going to take a bullet for Donald Trump. This man is very weak constitutionally. This man will give in. This man will cave to save himself. This is what we know about Meadows. And so he was a good target, a soft target in that respect, and a valuable target. And so some people might grumble, well, he's going to get off scot-free. I don't care, because he's going to take so many people down. It's going to be well worth it.
I was just about to grumble that he's going to get off scot-free because this is the problem, isn't it? We've got Ken Cheeseborough, who's flipped. We've got Jenna Ellis, who's flipped. We'll talk about her in a minute. And Meadows getting this immunity deal, this plea deal. Who's the third person that's flipped that I skipped over? Isn't there 3?
Yeah. So Ellis. There is another person.
There is another one.
It's not somebody that's that significant, I don't think.
And so, the flippage means what? A sentence. It means that avoiding prison, right? I know that much. But will there be some punishment for these characters? These scumbags, as you describe, because to get away with it completely. I mean, I think in the British judicial system, they would get a reduced sentence. That's not what's going to happen here, though, is it?
Well, I mean, they got probation. I mean, they're on probation. I think, their law licenses are likely to be lost. I don't think that they can practice law again. So that's pretty significant. Sidney Powell is the other person that we're trying to think of.
Well done. 10 points.
Because I was thinking there was 3 lawyers. So yeah, 3 lawyers are not going to be able to practice law, most likely. I don't know what they're going to do for a job, because, a lot of these guys, even though they couldn't necessarily practice law that much or get as many clients as they used to, they at least had the grift going. They had their podcasts and they were part of the MAGA team. But now that's gone. I mean, no one's going to trust these people anymore on Team MAGA. As far as they have a few defenders, but not many. So I'm not really sure how any of these people are going to earn a living, the rest of their lives. And the grift
was them earning a living, wasn't it? I mean, this is the point that, I'm convinced that some of them, if not all of them, even if they knew in the back of their mind that the election wasn't rigged and they, just went along with it because they were just, trying to help the MAGA ethos, MAGA movement, that, if they knew and they still carried out these crimes. That is, that kind of makes them a terrible person. But they're earning a living from it, aren't they? They are grifting. They're receiving funds, campaign funds in some cases, and so, as you say, they're out of a job because they've bitten the hand that feeds them.
Yeah, they really have. And, corporate America's not going to hire them. A big law firm's not going to hire them. And now their MAGA grifts are going to dry up because they're cooperating with the government. So, it's I don't think they're going to have a happy ending, even though they might avoid prison.
Yeah. Trump has posted on Truth Social a whole diatribe about Mark Meadows. I'm going to read it out. I'll put it on the screen. It's very small for me to read, so I'm going to read it off my phone. But this is something you can explain to us the significance of this, because this is the thing that is so terrifying in my view about Donald Trump, is that he cannot take direction from a judge. It's like he just has no interest in following the requirements to keep quiet. He posted, "I don't think Mark Meadows would lie about the rigged and stolen 2020 presidential election merely for getting immunity against prosecution," then in brackets persecution, "by deranged prosecutor Jack Smith. But when you really think about it, after being hounded like a dog for 3 years, told you'll be going to jail for the rest of your life, your money and your family will be forever gone, and we're not at all interested in exposing those that did the rigging, if you say bad things about that terrible monster, Donald J. Trump, we won't put you in prison. You can keep your family and your wealth, and perhaps if you can make up some really horrible stuff and out him, we may very well erect a statue of you in the middle of our decaying and now very violent capital, Washington, D.C. Some people would make that deal, but they are weaklings and cowards, and so bad for the future of our failing nation. I don't think that Mark Meadows is one of them, but who really knows? Make America great again." Ron, he is nuts, this guy. I mean, that was 1,000 thoughts in one post. And none of it made sense.
Well, it makes sense to me, being a criminal lawyer. That's a threat. That's a threat from a mob boss. Yeah. That's what that is. He's telling Mark Meadows, listen, man, you can back out of this. You can just say that they pressured you to. You don't have to go through with this, because look, I've defended racketeering cases. I've defended racketeering cases where the government had flipped a lot of co-defendants against my clients.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that a lot of pressure was put to bear on those people who flipped. And many of them chickened out of testifying. In fact, some of them were in the back room getting ready to be brought out onto the stand and refused to go into the courtroom. Because they chickened out literally at the last minute. And the reason why they chicken out is because of things like this: intimidations, veiled threats. Oh, Mark, I'm sure you're not going to do this. I'm sure you're only doing this because they're threatening you. And I'm sure that you are not going to go through with this. So, when the gag order was, and people said, well, Judge Chutkan stayed the gag order, so you can't do anything. That's nonsense. That is not true, because when they had the hearing on the gag order, Trump's lawyers argued that a gag order wasn't needed because there was already a pretrial release order on him not to tamper with witnesses. And that's what this is. So there doesn't need to be a gag order for this to be a violation of his pretrial release. And the frustrating thing for me, and I defended DOJ for 2 years, is I'm done defending them, is that they will not take action on things like this, aggressive action.
Yeah.
This is a violation of his pretrial release. He should have been hauled into court tomorrow for this.
I maintain my position, and I know that it's not popular on this network, but I still think Trump is going to get away with all of this. I and I know, I'm one of the few commentators who is not a lawyer, but I'm just using my kind of social instinct and my understanding of how the office of president, even if you're a fascist, for some reason seems to be more important than getting justice done. I don't like judging Goran, I have to say, just for a moment, when they showed that video clip of the camera panning around the courtroom and then it came to him and he took off his glasses and gave a grin. I was like, what the hell are you doing, man? This is the reason we wear wigs and gowns in the High Court in England, because it's serious. This is a serious thing. This is probably the most important and serious trial and set of trials, because of course there's plenty of them, in American political and legal history. A president trying to overturn an election and then lying about it and lying to his base.
Let me just say that they do that 1 minute courtroom cam every day, and he hasn't done it since because he took a lot of heat for it.
Right.
But you're right. There's no universe where I could have possibly imagined doing that as a judge in that situation. I have no idea where he.
It was like an episode of the Muppets, you know.
It was crazy.
I didn't enjoy any of that, and the seriousness of the courtroom. You know, the outside of courtrooms. Another thing about kind of English history for you. Just a brief history lesson. I know you're a former history teacher, so you'll know they made courtrooms look scary, with like gargoyles and Gothic scripture and all kind of to make defendants feel the seriousness of being up in front of a judge.
Yeah.
And for him to pull faces and gurn and make it and then a $5,000 fine, a $10,000 fine, the guy's a joke, Ron.
Yeah, and I'm going to say too, as far as him getting away with this, I'll go back to that.
Yeah.
There is only one way that he gets away with this. And I think Trump fully understands that. And that is his strategy. The only way he gets away with this is to postpone all of the cases until after the election and then win the election. That's his only way of beating all of this. He understands that. And that's why they're filing all these motions, recuse, change venue, appeal this, appeal that. Yeah, they're going to do everything they possibly can to delay this until after the election. And then if he wins, he pardons himself on the federal stuff. He can't be prosecuted in state court. So, you know, he's home free.
And we have a fascist as House Speaker. It all, you know, the whole kind of plan, the big plan of installing these kind of Trump-friendly characters up and down the country in various places, not just in the judiciary, but also, you know, as representatives, and then sticking one of these people in the speaker chair. It's a terrifying thought. And, you know, I'll just caveat my view of the fact that I think he's going to get away with it with saying that for me, even house arrest in Mar-a-Lago is getting away with it. Being allowed to continue his lavish life, play the golf, hang out with his friends, pretend to be the president, wearing the badge and, you know, being called Mr. President. Even if he's found guilty, I think the worst he'll get is just, you know, hanging out in Mar-a-Lago for the rest of his life. Which
I don't agree with that part. I think if he's found guilty, he's going to prison. So we'll see. We'll see.
I'm looking forward. How long do we have to wait for this? It's, you know,
I'm putting all my faith in Judge Chutkan and the January 6th case. I have no faith in anything else. No. That's where all my faith is.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to that episode that we do. Maybe we'll try and be in the same room for that episode, you know, so we can like get hold of each other. Listen, we have to take a quick pause for our sponsor, but we're going to come back and I want to talk about Jenna Ellis, and I'll show that video of her pretending to cry or managing to turn on the taps when pleading guilty for trying to overturn the election as she did in Georgia. That's next here on Uncovered. Did you know that poor sleep can cause weight gain, mood issues, poor mental health, and lower productivity? Sleep is the foundation of our mental and physical health and performance in our days. Having consistent nighttime routine is non-negotiable. When I don't get enough sleep, trust me, you don't want to be around me the next day. Introducing Beam Dream. You know, we've been raving about Beam Dream Powder. They're healthy hot cocoa for sleep. And today, our listeners get a special discount on Beam Dream Powder, their best-selling healthy hot cocoa for sleep with no added sugar. Now available in delicious flavors like sea salt caramel, cinnamon cocoa, and chocolate peanut butter. Better sleep has never tasted better. Dream contains a powerful all-natural blend of reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, melatonin, and nano-CBD to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. A recent clinical study revealed Dream helped 93% of users wake up feeling more refreshed, and 93% reported that Dream helped them get a more restful night's sleep. Just mix Beam Dream into hot water or milk, stir or froth, and enjoy before bedtime. I've personally tried Beam Dream and it lived up to the hype. Beam Dream is delicious and just a wonderful nighttime routine. And also, most importantly, it helped me fall asleep and stay asleep. The next day I woke up ready and eager to take on all of life's challenges and tasks. Find out why Forbes and New York Times are all talking about Beam and why it's trusted by the world's top athletes and business professionals. If you want to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder, get up to 40% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/uncovered and use code UNCOVERED at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/uncovered and use code UNCOVERED for up to 40% off. We're back with Uncovered. I'm Anthony Davis, and he's Ron Filipkowski. We are just working our way through the big news of the day. Of course, the House Speaker has finally been voted upon, and a character, Mike Johnson, has won 220 votes. All House Republicans voted for him. So we've been looking at that and Trump's gag order and talking about how Trump's been sharing nuclear secrets potentially. If you missed the beginning of the show, of course, once we finish, you can rewind and go again. Let's talk about Jenna Ellis now, Ron, because she is... Well, first, just tell us who she is and why, I want to kind of build up to her pleading guilty because I was kind of surprised. What about you?
Yeah, it sort of did come as a surprise out of nowhere, especially since she had raised so much money saying that she was going to fight it. She raised $216,000 on her Give, Send, Go, which is sort of like the Christian version of GoFundMe. Right. And her lawyer ran the account. It's just amazing grift. You get charged with a crime and your lawyer sets up this Give, Send, Go, and the money starts rolling in for all these people.
And constantly using the excuse of being a good Christian all the time. This is what drives me mad about it. It's like, using either God as an excuse or, I'm a good Christian and therefore I am pleading guilty because I'm a good Christian and God has told me to do this and it's the right thing. What about before? When you were helping Donald Trump overturn the election and everybody in the country in their right mind knew that there was no election fraud, and yet you're carrying this out for Donald Trump. That's what I don't understand, is the double standard and the use of religion to kind of make it okay.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how she ended up with Rudy and Sidney Powell, because I know that, I know how they found Powell, but I'm not really sure how they hooked up with Jenna, because Jenna was a pretty obscure Colorado lawyer, people derisively referred to as a traffic court lawyer. I think she did more than that. She did sort of, she had a small practice doing some smaller cases, but referred to herself as a constitutional attorney. And she went the full MAGA and said the election was stolen. Somehow she got lumped in there with Rudy and Sidney. But then when she gave her first press conference, it was just when they had their first press conference and it came her time to speak, she was just so bizarre. She was all over the place saying all kinds of crazy stuff. So it was pretty clear she had no idea what she was talking about. She had no evidence of fraud, and she was scolding and lecturing the reporters that they didn't know what they were talking about and this and that. So she was very arrogant, very snotty on social media, a know-it-all. And so I think that one of the reasons why people were so gleeful about her plea, more so than anybody else up to this point, was because of that, because of her snottiness and her arrogance during this entire. So to see her in tears, pleading guilty and throwing herself in the mercy of the court and all of that, I think was very satisfying to a lot of people.
Let's take a look at the moment where before I play it, didn't she tell others to cry? Wasn't there a few posts or something where Jenna Ellis was advising other people that the way that you kind of present yourself well in these situations is to turn on the taps?
Well, I don't know that, but here's what I'll say about that. This statement is completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
I don't know why she gave this statement. It made no it made no difference whatsoever in the outcome of her case. This is just an elocution that somebody makes. So there's no point in. It's not like the judge, oh, I heard what you said and I'm going to give you less probation.
But it's performative, isn't it? It's for the cameras.
It's performative. But it was not helpful to her with MAGA, because if there's anybody who hated this statement, it was her own supporters hated this statement of what she had to say. So I didn't understand why she gave it at all.
Because Sidney Powell didn't do one, right? And
nobody.
So, yeah. Okay. Here she is.
Has anyone forced, threatened, promised, or coerced you in any way to enter into this guilty plea?
No, ma'am.
Is it your decision to waive these rights and enter a guilty plea because you are in fact guilty?
It is.
How do you plead to aiding and abetting false statements and writings and under accusation 23 SC 190514?
Guilty.
Thank you, Your Honor, for the opportunity to address the court. As an attorney who is also a Christian, I take my responsibilities as a lawyer very seriously, and I endeavor to be a person of sound moral and ethical character in all of my dealings. In the wake of the 2020 presidential election, I believed that challenging the results on behalf of President Trump should be pursued in a just and legal way. I endeavored to represent my client to the best of my ability. I relied on others, including lawyers with many more years of experience than I, to provide me with true and reliable information, especially since my role involved speaking to the media and to legislators in various states. What I did not do, but should have done, Your Honor, was to make sure that the facts the other lawyers alleged to be true were in fact true. In the frenetic pace of attempting to raise challenges to the election in several states, including Georgia, I failed to do my due diligence. I believe in and I value election integrity. If I knew then what I know now, I would have declined to represent Donald Trump in these post-election challenges.
Yeah, see, it's that last part where she burned her bridge with MAGA. You know, I only got in one public dispute with her a couple of years ago, and her one line that she just said reminded me of that, which was she said, I represented my client, Donald Trump, to the best of her ability. Well, when she was fired, because Trump fired her like halfway through because she was such a disaster, and Trump got rid of her. So I posted, Trump fired her, and she came back at me with, I wasn't fired. I was never actually his attorney officially, and I'm doing other things now, and I'm pursuing a media career, but now she's saying that, Donald Trump was representing Trump. So yeah, she's just a habitual liar.
Yeah. But it was the same with Sidney Powell. I mean, there was an argument circulating where, she wasn't Trump's lawyer. She was Rudy Giuliani's lawyer, and it's like
Michael Flynn's lawyer.
Oh, Michael Flynn's lawyer. That's right.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I mean, there's plenty of evidence of Giuliani introducing the legal team, including Sidney Powell, and saying they're representing the Trump campaign and representing Donald Trump. And it's like, you can argue it as much as you like. It is the very people here who are at the center of this investigation who are the ones that are contradicting the new rhetoric.
She might not have had a signed contract between her and Trump, but she was on the Trump team and getting paid.
Right. And Trump always does this thing of, well, I've never heard of her.
Right.
I don't know who she is.
Which he did.
Yeah. But, no recollection whatsoever. And then, of course, a million videos circulating, including, us at Midas Touch, basically contradicting everything. And even Joe Biden's new campaign, Twitter campaign, the Biden-Harris HQ, where they are throwing stuff up all the time, contradicting stuff that's being said by the right. And, this is the thing that I don't understand in this modern world of online communication, is that there are receipts. All of this stuff comes with receipts, and yet these MAGA people, they deny despite knowing that there is video material and photographic evidence.
Well, I've said this before, like to be on the left on social media is much more difficult to be on the right, because we get fact checked like crazy by our followers. Like if I say one thing wrong or get one fact wrong or get a date wrong, I'm immediately corrected, and I don't mind that at all. I don't
No,
take
quite
it
right.
personally.
Yeah.
But on the right, there's no fact checking. There's nobody out there that goes, "Oh, you got that wrong," or "No, that clip's doctored or edited." They don't do that on the right. So you can kind of get away with it much more if you're on that side.
Right. We mentioned Rudy Giuliani just a moment ago. He is going down the batshit route, and unraveling just as quickly as Donald Trump is at the moment. His latest argument is that Joe Biden must be an Iranian spy, or that Iran has somehow infiltrated the Biden campaign. I'll play the clip and then we'll try and get our heads around what this nutcase is talking about.
But let's face it, he's on Iran's side and he's on Hamas's side. He is not on our side. We don't have a president now really functioning in the best interest of the United States. Plus, he's got a bunch of spies in his administration. This guy is working for Iran. Why? Maybe because they've infiltrated his administration, the way the communists infiltrated Roosevelt's administration.
America's mayor, ladies and gentlemen.
He's really gone off the deep end, man. I mean, his conspiracies, there's no end to them. And there is a conspiracy right now on the right that, and Rudy's latched on to this, that, that there's some Hamas or pro-Palestinian sympathizers in the Biden administration. And I think what it is it's really more like, there's people that are sympathetic to Palestine, not to Hamas.
Well, to innocent civilians
people.
being caught up in the rocket attacks. That really is what it is, and that is just humanity. It's not about taking sides.
It doesn't mean that you're an Iranian spy if you don't want to see innocent Palestine civilians killed, right? But that's where Rudy is. Rudy will. So what he's saying is that Biden is working for Iran because he's compromised. And then he linked that up with communists being in Franklin Roosevelt's administration. I think who he's talking about is Harry Haskins, who was suspected to be like a communist sympathizer, maybe, who was an aide. I think that's who he's talking about. But I mean, to suggest that the FDR administration was communist or infiltrated by
such
communists.
A weird reference.
It's so crazy.
It's like, no one bar you is going to pick up on it necessarily. It has no value. What are the chances of Rudy Giuliani flipping? Following?
No, zero. No. Rudy will be the one guy who won't flip. No, he'll never flip on Trump. No, I think Rudy will take a bunch of pills and do it the old Roman emperor way.
Or be found floating in the Hudson or something.
Yeah, he'll take care of himself before he testifies against Trump. That will never happen.
There was some talk online earlier of Donald Trump kind of admitting his guilt eventually in return for a shorter or no sentence. I mean,
you can't do it.
No, that's what I was thinking. I was going through his kind of mental pathology. And thinking that in a million years that the narcissist in chief would never admit anything. He doesn't even admit that he threw ketchup on the wall. He's not going to admit to overturning the election or lying about election fraud, is he?
No. In fact, whenever he's asked like to admit mistakes or like, can you name anything? We all have things in our past where you could ask us, are there things you would have done differently as a parent or in a job or in school or growing up? We all have things that we could list. If you ask Donald Trump those questions, his answers are nothing. I mean, the only thing that he will say, if you ask him, what did you make any mistakes as president? If you ask him that question, he will only have one thing that he will say, and that is that he appointed people who were not loyal.
Right.
And that's his only answer. That's not a fault of him. He's saying that's just, well, I chose the wrong people, because he blames other people even for that. He says those people were recommended to me by others. So even that is not his fault. So no, Trump, the other reason why Trump could never make a deal like that is because his credibility is what props up his whole empire right now in terms of being the fighter, being the guy who's going to stick it to the man, fight the deep state. That's all the money's flowing in. Everything he is right now is wrapped up in that. The second that he admits guilt on something, all of that comes crashing down. So he cannot do it. And he's talked about this election. When he talks about this election is about the survival of our country, what he is saying is this election is about his survival.
Yeah.
Because if he doesn't win, his life is over, really.
Good.
Yeah.
What's the effect on his base? Do you think that these cases, and obviously him having to, make speeches in the hallways of a courthouse, and all the flipping, the flipping of these 4 people now, is this chipping away at the base in any way, or is it just making them stronger?
I think there's a sense of worry. I think there is a sense of worry on his part. They'll pound their chests and, this only makes us stronger. He only gets more support. The more they attack him, the better he is. That's the hardcore 25%, feel that way. Okay. And I know who those people are very well, and you can't convince them. But the other half of MAGA has some realism involved here. And what they worry about is the drain on his time, his energy, and his money is going to take, and eventually this stuff is going to affect the public. And I think they get that the weight of this stuff is a lot to overcome.
Because it is starting to affect him, and we've seen him at rallies mispronouncing, miscalling,
words.
I've got a couple of clips here. First, let's show the clip about Trump talking about the auto workers and electric vehicles. It's one of his. It's one of those subjects, a little bit like anything that is climate related, when
windmills,
windmills instead of wind turbines and everything else, that he really has very little knowledge on. He doesn't know what climate change is. He doesn't understand about global temperatures. He pulled the country out of the Paris Climate Accord without really knowing what it was. He certainly didn't read it. And so here he is talking again about the auto workers and their future. Here it is.
And I'm telling you, you shouldn't pay those dues. You should not pay your dues because they're selling you to hell. You're going to be going to hell. You're not going to have any jobs. All those cars are going to be made in China. Every one of them. You can forget it, Michigan. You can forget it, South Carolina. You can forget it, everybody. All of those cars are going to be made in China.
Yeah, well, all of the Teslas are made in America for the American market. So there's the first thing. Chevy, huge investment in electric vehicles. Let's not forget, if you want to get your $7,500 rebate for an electric vehicle, it has to be made in America. And anyone who's bought a Chevy Bolt or a Volt or any of these cars is getting that because they're made in America. He doesn't know what he's talking about, Ron.
Yeah, Trump's weakness is that he acts like if he knows one thing about one thing, then he acts like he's an expert. This has always been Trump his whole life. So Trump has got it in his head that he must win Michigan, and I think he's right. He's got to win two of the 4 of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, or Arizona. He's got to win 2 of the 4. So Michigan's a critical state. And so he's got it in his head, Michigan, auto, even though Michigan is much more than auto workers, but auto workers are important in Michigan. But he's got it in his head. I've got to win the auto workers, then I'll win Michigan, then I'll win the presidency. How do I win the auto workers? Well, he knows he's always been anti-union his whole life, so that's not going to work. So he's come up with this alternative argument, which is, hey, all this union stuff doesn't really matter because Biden wants all electric vehicles. He's put in mandates, wants mandates, et cetera, et cetera. He's gonna, and you don't make any electric
we should
vehicles.
Say that. That's not true.
That's not true. That's not true.
Vehicles.
He lies about that. It's not. I think there's no mandates right now. I think there are goals and aspirations.
Yeah, there's a goal to switch out from combustion engines, but every country that has put a line in the sand has had to extend it and extend it and extend it, and that's just the reality. Yeah.
But the other idea that he's got this in his head that all electric cars are made in China, and all future electric cars are going to be made in China. Why can't we make them? I don't know. No one's really asked him that. Why can't the U.S. make electric cars?
Yeah.
He hasn't. No one's really asked him that yet. But he's got it in his head that this is his argument. Biden is requiring all electric cars by X date. We don't make any. Therefore, all your jobs are going to be gone, and they're all going to be in China. Yeah. And that's how he's going to win Michigan. This is how his mind works.
So he isn't going to win Michigan. The other thing I would say is that he also thinks that electric cars can only go 100 miles.
Oh, that's also part of it.
He doesn't realize that now they go 300, 400, 500 miles, which is more than a gas tank, for goodness sake. And it's almost as if
he thinks they can only go like 10 miles an hour.
Yeah, he has absolutely no concept. And yet anybody who has switched to an electric vehicle will never go back to an internal combustion engine. Literally, it is such a game changer. And yeah, the charging infrastructure is a bit of a problem, which is something they're working on. But he's really missing the point of one of the biggest revolutionary moments in American retail. And that is that people are buying electric cars like they're going out of fashion.
Because he doesn't care.
He's missing the boat.
This is a guy who has listened to the same 12 songs every day for his entire life.
Yeah.
It's on a loop. He plays the same 12 songs at Mar-a-Lago. This guy is stuck in the 1970s, right? He's not interested in progress or science or anything like that.
And he has like trigger words, doesn't he? I was thinking about this. Like if, let's play a game, you and I. If I say a word, you tell me what Trump's going to say about it. Chicago.
Crime, shooting. Right? Yeah. A lot of black people shooting each other.
Yeah. Detroit.
That's what Trump would say. Yeah. Let's make this clear so I don't get a clipped here. We're talking about Trump. Yes.
Yeah. But you could play buzzword bingo with Donald Trump.
I can do it all day.
It's just trigger words where he goes into a routine that he's been doing for years. And it doesn't change with the times.
Yeah, you can bring up Germany, and he's going to talk about NATO,
right?
And they're not paying their fair share, and
right.
I mean that's what he knows about Germany, and I mean it's just he knows one thing about a certain topic, and that's it.
And yet he says, nobody knows more about the climate than me. Nobody knows more about electric vehicles than me. Let's play one final clip of Trump. This is where he miscalls, he's talking about Viktor Orban. And well, I won't give it away. I don't want to say the punchline because it's kind of funny. And then we'll talk about it after. Here he is.
Had a lot of the horrible things. The world is exploding. If you take a look, I mean, the whole world is exploding. I was very honored as a man. Viktor Orban. Did anyone ever hear of him? He's probably like one of the strongest leaders anywhere in the world, and he's the leader of He's the leader of Turkey. Fronts on both Russia.
He says he's the leader of Turkey. He says it quietly because he actually probably knows that he's wrong, right?
Yeah, he's not sure.
Right. So Erdogan, just so we know, Erdogan is the leader of Turkey. Viktor Orban is the far right and fascist leader of Hungary, and who Trump idolizes because, of course, he loves a dictator. But in the clip, he kind of says Turkey under his breath because he kind of can't remember.
Right. He does this all the time. I mean, in his speeches now, where he will do that. He'll start going into something and then he'll not know the answer, or he'll not know the country or the name, and he'll just trail off and change the subject. He does this constantly in his speeches now. He did not used to do this as much 4 years ago or 8 years ago, but it's constantly now. And I don't know if it's just age, cognitive decline, if it's all the stress of the trials and all that getting to him, or a combination of all that. But the interesting thing is Ron DeSantis is finally calling him out on this stuff, and is finally saying this guy's losing it. He's not all there. And hey, finally a Republican candidate is saying this.
Chris Christie's been saying some interesting stuff the last 48 hours, hasn't he? He did that speech about him not being perfect, and he said, stop falling for candidates who claim that they are perfect.
I didn't hear him say that, but that's a good line.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. You know, it's weird with Chris Christie because obviously, if you are, you know, have political connections to him or his district, and you know the bridge stuff and everything else, then you have very strong opinions. But he actually speaks to me as a layperson. He speaks the language of modernity. You know, he is not stuck in the past. He knows how to talk about emotions. And, you know, even the way he talks about how he struggled with his weight his whole life. And I do find that that's interesting because it's different to every other Republican candidate.
He's a good debater, and he's good in town halls. And that's why Trump brought him in to help him prep for the debate and almost killed him by giving him COVID, because Chris Christie is an excellent debater. Yeah. The problem for Chris Christie is he doesn't present well, let's say that, and he has a terrible record in New Jersey as governor. Yeah. And he's corrupt. But other than that, he'd be a fine candidate.
It's amazing. This country is amazing, isn't it? Let's finish with Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She has signed an order. She's governor of Arkansas, right? She's signed an order banning woke phrases. This is her new thing, right?
Yeah, if they demean women. So, and I can't even imagine any of these phrases were even used in the Arkansas state government. I don't think they probably were, but she was just trying to like make a splash, you know, and also the outfit that she wore was pretty interesting while she's doing this. But yeah, I mean, she announces like she's going to ban all these words that she probably found in some manual or book somewhere. Most of them are trans related phrases.
Yeah. So she's gone into the Urban Dictionary and like.
I find it hard to believe that these phrases are widely used in Arkansas, but she banned them anyway.
It's so crazy that there's so many important things to deal with, right. You know, like the especially in places like that, and yet this is the stuff that maybe she uses because it wants to, you know, gets her on the news. Let's take a look at her making this announcement.
Yeah, the idea that we have this just absolute insanity. We are now living in a world where everything is crazy versus what's normal. And the left continues to push this woke agenda, basically trying to erase the differences of women versus men, ignoring all of science and biology, and completely ignoring the fact that women have a unique perspective. Only women can actually give birth, no matter how many different ways they say it. That fact is completely based in science and reality, and we are no longer going to allow them to redefine terms that weaken and frankly demean women here in state government documents and here in the state of Arkansas.
I never actually hear Democrats explaining why there is question over genders that can give birth. Now, for those who are still confused about it, if you are born female and you have a womb and a functioning physiology for childbirth, but you are also trans, you change your gender to male, there is a chance that as a male you might choose to give birth. It's your right.
It has happened.
And it has happened.
It's very rare, but it has happened.
Right. And this is the thing that the Republicans either can't get their head around or refuse to accept. You know, there are millions of trans people in this country, millions. And yet it is a total denial of these people's rights. And it is so, you know, for the LGBTQ plus community, these people just sound so dumb.
Yeah, I mean, an example of one of the phrases she banned was birth person, because they are upset that what they're saying is that the word mother should be used to describe someone who gave birth, and not birth person. I suppose that there are people somewhere that use the term birth person. I have never heard anybody
who cares
use it, but I don't care. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't threaten me, you know? So yes, but for them, this is, you know, how to raise money, how to fundraise, how to get people worked up, and how to divert attention from away from her corruption with her
lectern
scandal. Yeah.
For those who don't know, she supposedly spent $19,000 on a lectern, which is just under the threshold for donations or something. Is that right? And it was put through the books.
She spent it on something else, I think a vacation or something, but she claimed it was for a lectern.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's some lectern. Okay, well, listen, it's been a pleasure. We have to finish. It's an historic day as there is a new Speaker of the House who happens to be a far-right Christian nationalist MAGA Republican, Mike Johnson. Every House Republican voted for him. So here on Midas Touch, we are going to do our best to expose the extremist rhetoric coming from him. He's an insurrectionist as well, doesn't believe that Joe Biden is the legitimate winner of the 2020 election. So there'll be a lot of ramifications with that. Ron, just before we finish, tell us about your role as editor-in-chief of MidasTouch.com. What can people look forward to if they go there?
Well, yeah, on our website, I mean, we're trying to produce really an alternative to Twitter. I mean, a really good function by having. We're not trying to be the New York Times. We're not trying to be the Washington Post and do a lot of long form stuff. We do some, but we have 7 writers, including myself. And we're really trying to do break news, quick hitting stuff, including a lot of clips. And we're trying to get stuff out really fast as it's happening throughout the day, 24/7. And so again, it's sort of like, I think if you didn't want to go on Twitter and you wanted to go on a website to kind of get something that is Twitter but not Twitter, like a similar format, that's what our website is designed to be. It's sort of like Twitter plus, it's not the New York Times.
No.
And so we're having a lot of fun with it. It's hard work. We're busy constantly, but it's a lot of fun too.
Well, you always seem to be first with the story, and I think that's what really matters. You get it up there first, and then you flesh out the details. So MidasTouch.com for all the latest. I'm Anthony Davis. He's Ron Filipkowski. We'll be back next Wednesday for another episode of Uncovered. You can catch me every morning on the 5-Minute News podcast, and I'll be here on Sunday evening for the weekend show. Looking forward to that. Have a great week, Ron.
You too.